Yes, indeed. That's a good point. So, okay, let's get started straight away because we have a lot to get through today. So, first of all, once again, welcome everyone to our weekly webinar, Lessons from the Lockdown. Thursday the 25th, as John just said, we're at that midway, halfway point of the year. Nights start to get shorter. Hopefully, we get a bit more summer than we've had to date. But other than that, for sure, before you know it,
We
there'll
had
be
a great May, absolutely great May, best ever.
yeah, I'm thinking more July, August, and a bit of heat and sunshine. And but before you know it, there'll be Christmas songs playing in the shops, as there always is, but around about Halloween. So
But if we go to shops, so
yeah, well, that's true too. They're kind of online. So again, just a quick shout out to those in the NHS, those who are essential service staff. Again, for many people, while we're returning to a degree of normality, they still find themselves obviously working flat out in terms of those who are still affected by the virus. So again, just a quick pause for them. So agenda today, different than most weeks. Normally we have a brief market update, and then we have a special tip that we think is relevant to people in their property investment journey. But today is a very, very important topic because the whole area of regulation and compliance is absolutely key when it comes to either fundraising for property projects or indeed if you're an investor. And there has been some interesting developments, shall we say, that we're going to get into today. So rather than spend time on other two things, we're going to deep dive straight into this. And all I can say by way of introduction is, for those who aren't aware, the FCA issued a press release last Thursday. And this was on the topic of, well, speculative liquid securities, which will include a lot more than just mini bonds, which I'll let John cover. But there had been a temporary ban on the marketing of these type of securities to retail or restricted investors. That had been come in Q4 last year. The FCA have now indicated that they intend to make it permanent, and they've issued a consultation. So if you haven't read that, you can go on and get all the information about that. And we would encourage people to get involved in the consultation. But by way of introduction to John, you ignore this information at your peril if you're in the property game. Ignorance is no defense in law. And if you're a fundraiser or you're an investor, you owe it to yourself to make sure you understand what's happening and make sure you're on the right side of the regulations and, of course, the law. So I'm literally going to stop there for me. I might bounce in the odd time, John, with a point of clarification or question. Other than that, I'm going to let you just sort of tear through your presentation,
okay.
and then we might have some time for Q&A at the end.
Cool. Yeah, and folks, definitely put questions in the Q&A. David can be monitoring that, and I think we'll have plenty of time for it. So I'm trying to educate you as to what the document says, the direction of intent from the FCA, how it ties into the temporary ban last year. And with the agenda, the underlying assumption is that we want to invest together, that we want to be able to put our money together, work together, do investments together, and hopefully reach profitable outcomes together. Next slide. So my sort of personal agenda in this is if we could get a lot of pressure on the rogue actors by having a clear, transparent way for savvy investors to raise money, and so that all the cash investors know where to go, they know how to check things out, they understand what the process is, then there'll be fewer rogues preying on people. There'll be people that can find good deals, they'll get them funded, and there'll be cash investors. It's like, look, this is all too much work. I don't have time. Can I just give you the money? And let's do it in a fair and equitable fashion following a well laid out process. So that's my quote hidden agenda or personal view. Next. Okay, this shouldn't be duplicated. Next. There we go. Okay. So this came out in November 2019, late November with immediate effect in January. So they didn't do a consultation. That's why it's a temporary intervention. And it was very much focused on mini bonds. It's right there in the title. And the idea of promoting mini bonds to retail investors. So this is through online means and other processes. When you actually read the document, it extended from mini bonds beyond that into preference shares, which used sometimes for the same effect. and it made reference to any form of debenture. So you might argue, and I think it would be safe to argue, that therefore all loan notes are covered by this. And if it's about the promotion to the public, as in people who might be retail investors can see it, that's what they were trying to stop. They wanted the retail investors not to even notice. And they were definitely targeting a few groups, bridge type lenders for various sectors, not just the property sector. So anybody that raised money to then lend out for the projects. Also anybody who raised money for their own projects as a development, buy it, improve it, sell it. This is all highly speculative investing is the view of the FCA. I think most property people would agree. And they basically said most of the retail public do not understand this. So ban came into place. They were very clear that this could only last for 12 months. They don't have any authority to make it longer unless they go through a consultation and regular process by which they change their regulations. And they clearly stated last November that that is exactly what they were going to do. Roll forward, David. So in about a week, it's probably just about a week now, this came out. And notice the title change, or the focus has changed a little. It's including speculative mini bonds, but they're highlighting that this is marketing of speculative illiquid investments to retail investors. It's not just mini bonds. And the FCA doesn't want people to think it's just mini bonds. People have been switching to other types of instruments, and therefore they're now broadening the scope or clarifying the scope or calling out other ways that people could raise money and making it clear that we don't want to stop with mini bonds. We want to catch everything that is sort of structured the same way. And this was released in June, as it says, it's CP, consultation paper, 20/8. The 20 is for the year 2020, and 8 means this is the 8th consultation this year. It is open till October 1st for feedback from anybody that wants to call them, email them, submit online. They like to hear input. So take advantage. Next slide.
Just ask you on that point, how much influence can sort of people in the property world getting involved in the consultation? I mean, have their mind made up more or less, or will they genuinely change their plan, or if you like, be influenced if the relevant people are been involved in the consultation?
So I don't think there's a focus on relevance. I think there would be a focus on articulation of your point. So I don't think they care whether you are just a single developer having a comment, but it's well articulated versus you run some trade body or something. What they did do in this consultation here is they did take on board some early feedback they received to the temporary ban, and they made points of clarification. They elaborated. They actually carved out a situation, said we weren't in trying to cover this, and therefore we're going to make it very clear going forward that we're not covering this by the temporary ban, or that that wasn't the point of the temporary ban. So I think that shows that they are open to consultation. Exactly who put forward those points, I don't know, so I'm not sure the full process, but I'm hopeful, and I think there is evidence that consultation does include feedback, and feedback will be taken on board.
Okay, so it is important that people with an interest in this development get involved in the process and feel they can be engaged and make their submissions.
Yes, and these are the 5 questions they're asking, and you could argue a little that because these are the questions they're asking, they're not terribly focused on other things. They want answers to these questions, and in particular, if you don't agree with their direction of travel, give them reasons why. And that was, there's an example where they clearly did carve out something specific so that they wouldn't cause problems, and it was particularly for, it looks to be development projects. So in the whole paper, it's 40 or so pages, and probably not all of that is what you would normally read, because some of it is just the legislative text after the explanation. These are the 5 they want answers to, and if you want to speak literally, there's a name of a person, Andrew something or other, published with a phone number, or you can contact them through digital means. If you do submit a response, it is considered part of the public record. They won't attribute individual comments to individual names, but they will publish a list of everybody's submitted comments, and they'll publish all the comments or the the collective impact of the comments, maybe not word for word. In fact, they don't publish word for word comments. If you don't want your name at all published, they tell you how to tell them that so that they can make sure it doesn't happen. Next. I think for those that aren't going to read the document, if you look in the document, I think it's around page 28, this is the only flow chart in the whole document. And this flow chart clearly explains what they're trying to do. And it's pretty much the view of how the world will be after the new regulations. So we're talking about marketing of basically high risk investments. That's what the SIS essentially stands for, is the speculative investment schemes. So after these rules of marketing have been made permanent, and let me highlight one point about that, I'll back up a little. The FCA doesn't have a view on the underlying asset. They don't regulate real estate or any sort of rules of how you buy and sell real estate. What they regulate is the promotion of investment opportunities where someone is a passive investor, and that's what they're talking about, is speculative investment schemes. So they can only regulate that part, which means they can regulate the fundraising. So if these rules come into place, you're going to go down this path. If you go down the far left, the mass marketing of speculative investments is prohibited for most retail investors. So as a property developer or someone with a planning opportunity or something else, assume you just cannot market this publicly. And then as we move across, we'll talk about the exceptions, because it says most retail investors. In the UK, anybody who is of legal age is a retail investor until proven otherwise. So you need some form of checking process. So everybody you have to assume is retail investor. If you put something up on Facebook, if you put it up on any other platform, you don't know who's reading it. So you have to assume a retail investor is going to see it. If we were to stay on the left and go all the way to the bottom, they expect a significant reduction in the number of retail investors who actually see the promotions. They want the retail investors to be naive to the opportunities they've missed out on. They don't want them to even know that there were opportunities out there. They've shown through studies with Warwick University and other means that retail investors will emotionally make bad decisions because they lack the understanding of how to assess the risk. And therefore, the only way to stop them from bad behavior is to make it so they can't even see the deal. We do this in other forms of society: pornography, drugs, alcohol. There are lots of restricted things that different groups cannot see or know about or cannot access. If we move to the middle column, these speculative investment schemes can only be marketed to certified high net worth or sophisticated investors. It's a little weird in the paper. Certified is really self-certified to a large extent. There's some nuances. I think for people on this session, just listen to this as, if someone self-certifies high net worth and you don't have reason to believe they're lying, that's probably going to be fine. Read the paper. There's very explicit language, but forget the word certified for a second. Think about high net worth and sophisticated are exempt from being retail investors, so you possibly can market to them. The problem is in the current consultation, and this is quite new, and therefore definitely puts some feedback. Not only do you have to check their status before you share anything, you actually have to check if it's suitable for them in their situation. A light touch suitability test, preliminary suitability assessment. You cannot just have them sign a self-cert and then hit them with all your information. You have to get to know them, their situation. If Wayne Rooney, I like to use this as a joke, if Wayne Rooney was in this, he would pass the high net worth. It's very easy to prove Wayne Rooney's high net worth without even him handing over any public documents or any private documents. The public documents will do. If he sits there and you can see his eyes are rolling, he asks questions that imply that he didn't understand what you just explained. There are lots of body cues, language cues, process cues that say, I'm not sure he knows what I'm talking about. I'm not sure he understands what I'm talking about. Therefore, he's probably not suitable, even though he is one of the people I could market to. Now, so it's very, very crystal clear. you can't even market to Wayne Rooney until after you've judged his suitability. So you have to know if he's exempt somehow, and you have to know that he is suitable somehow before you can even share, oh, here's what I'm doing. You can't then put something up on your website that says only for high net worth and sophisticated. You cannot use that waiver anymore to get you out of trouble. You are in trouble if you didn't do this in the right order. This is why they published this flow chart. And the text right above this is very clear about, we're trying to clarify the order must be in this order, not reversed. So let's assume all the way in the, go ahead.
One quick one on that. So the process for confirming that, so I'm talking to a Wayne Rooney type person. Do I just need to be able to say, if I'm asked, that yes, I mentally judged him to be suitable, or do I have to have some type of documentary trail that shows I went through a process?
I think it's important, if you were ever in front of a judge, that you'll be assumed to be guilty until proven innocent when it comes to, did you follow the process? So documentary evidence, contemporaneous notes, email log, files in some of your cabinet or your computer somewhere. And the FCA can come in and investigate and seize all this without notice. Mm-hmm. So you need to have it rather than just in your head. And particularly if it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years from now, are you going to remember what day you spoke to the person to check suitability versus what day they signed something to wire money?
Okay.
So contemporaneous notes at a minimum. I would like to see more of an online process that just timestamps things. It's easier. If we go all the way to the far right, the improved risk warnings and disclosures have to be in the document. So now you have permission. You've checked suitability. You've checked that they're exempt. You have to have very explicit risk warnings in the documents. Possibly they have to appear every page. Or if it's on a website, it has to be at the top of the website and has to stay there as people scroll. There's very explicit language, very explicit rules, whether it needs a box, whether it has to be a certain font, whether it can be gray or dark or light, proportionality to the rest of the text. And in particular, you must use explicit language that says the investor can lose 100% of their investment if they were to move forward. So you have to give them a full on, between the eyes, I'm gonna basically put all your money at risk and you need to know this before you step forward. It has to be in multiple different things. They have a reference that this is the exact wording we want you to use, and they give you an example with the box. Then they say, if you're gonna even think about having ISA money, you need to add this extra warning in there. So here's the text. And then they say, if you're using a platform that has a restriction on the number of characters, I think Twitter, maybe that's Instagram, maybe that's something else, but I think Twitter, you must use exactly these words before you say anything else. So in effect, if you can publish those words and anything else, lucky you. But if those words fill up the message, oh well, that's all they're gonna see is the risk warning.
Okay, so before we move off this topic, I have a question in there. It's actually an interesting question when you think about the angle he's coming at. Would Wayne Rooney, using him as an example, poor Wayne, for any Man United fans, I apologise, would Wayne make a sophisticated investor together with a high net worth investor? So he, in theory, could be both. So does this mean there really is no only high net worth anymore? So just proving that you're high net worth isn't enough. You actually have to prove that you're beyond that in terms of being the realm sophisticated?
No, a couple things. You can be exempt in the middle box by passing any one of the listed criteria. There's 2 for high net worth, there's 4 for sophisticated. If any one of those is true, you get the label high net worth or sophisticated. So that takes you out of the ordinary retail category. That does not address whether you understand things. Now, if someone was high net worth because they have a lot of property and they've been a long-term property investor, so I fit this one, I could then be judged suitable because it appears that I understand what we're doing. Someone else might be sophisticated, but none of the 4 criteria of sophisticated have anything to do with property. The closest one you can get to is you're a director of a company or have been with £1 million turnover. So there is no sophisticated category or subcategory that has anything to do with property, real estate, anything like that. So there's no way as a property investor you'll become sophisticated off the back of just your property. It's under the suitability assessment. So Wayne could be high net worth, not a sophisticated investor, but suitable because he understands, because his dad's a builder or something. I don't know if he is, and he's always been, you know, on the side doing some with property. Or Ryan Giggs or whatever his name is, was that way. So he would be quite easy to fit the suitability test of, does he understand what we're talking about? Now, an example could be, I've always been an HMO landlord if I was that person in front of you, but I've never done planning. So do I understand the risks of planning? It might be true that I understand property investing as HMO, but I don't understand planning, so I'm not suitable.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, conscious of time here, so we'll keep,
next.
keep going.
So these are actually, sorry, I forgot this is in here. These are the exact wording with the box. I put the green. All the green is me. But the last one on the page, you could lose all with the underlying of your money invested in this product is what you have to use if you're using a third-party marketing provider that has a character limit. The middle one is if you're talking about ISA, some people are implying that because it's ISA eligible, HMRC has approved the offer rather than they have authorized the person or the platform to use an ISA process. Very big difference. So the public gets very confused when they see some of these offers and they're trying to make it so it's easier for the public to understand 100% of your money is at risk. It's highly likely it'll get lost. 24, I think, % of all the money put in through various products like this have been lost, hundreds of millions. Next. So compliance is hard. Really, it really is hard. And you need to know a lot. You have to keep records. It's going to take time. The alternative, if you don't want to do it yourself, and I would suggest strongly that people are property investors. They can go find deals. They can run projects. Why take on compliance if you can outsource it? And in my language, you can outsource it for about £500 per deal so that you can actually promote your deal legally. And if you raise money through a platform that allows you to do this, there'll be a charge for the money you raise, but to just get your deal out there is about £500. So why do you want to set all this up, register with the ICO for data protection, comply with the FCA, have all that threat when you can do it a much better way through a platform? So that's my sort of, don't even worry about this stuff. Read the documents, you know the rules, but frankly, don't take it on board. Next slide. And this is an example of actually some of those risk warnings that we just saw in place on a live site, Leo Prop Crowd, already. And if you scroll on this page, that box, that orange box, stays in place. That continues to make it obvious, no matter where you are on this page, that you do have to understand that you can lose all your money. And many of the words here are actually what's in the consultation document. So funny enough, Leo Prop Crowd was ahead of the curve in some sense. And that's how to get in touch with me, but let's go to questions here.
Yeah. So again, if you have a question, fire it up. I want to go back to one slide, which is there. So just checking any other questions. Okay, so just by way of summary, John, about sort of 4 or 5 minutes here. To me, what you've said today, particularly off this slide, I think is the key slide you've showed, which is very, very good. So, I mean, I've gone back to this so people can screenshot this or take a photograph of it.
It's in the consultation paper. I didn't create this. The FCA is handing this to us.
But I mean, sorry, it's highlighted it for us today, actually bringing it and making sure this is the key part of the document.
Exactly. You can get everything you need right here, and then you can use the rest of the document as backing material.
Correct. So the point I want to make is clearly the bar has been raised. This press release and the follow-on from the temporary ban, clearly the bar has been raised in how we can communicate with investors, even as platforms, but also if you're a fundraiser and what you can and cannot say, and how the big thing is suitability. That's the big message I've got today. Not just ticking the box, I'm a high net worth. Are you a suitable high net worth individual? And that is definitely a change.
Yeah, and if you think about the SaaS marketplace, there's a number of investors who have worked for a large corporate for a long time in whatever roles they had, and they've built up quite a pension pot. And now they have hundreds of thousands of pounds in their pension pot, and they're looking to invest in property with that money. And it's almost the first time they've thought about investing in property. So it's a very tricky situation. I'm not saying that the money's their personal money, so therefore I'm not even sure how you would apply the high net worth test. But the suitability question is like, do they really understand? Now, what's interesting for retail investors, because I had an online conversation with someone, they were saying, oh, isn't this just the FCA trying to protect the good deals for the rich and keep the retail public in the dark? And my answer was twofold. First of all, the FCA has said very clearly that anybody can become a sophisticated investor by doing 2 or more deals. And if they do that of a particular type. So effectively, if you use crowdfunding and you invest in 2 deals, and I'm definitely talking about what is referred to as investment-based crowdfunding. So equity, shares, bonds, whatever, through a site like Leoprop Crowd and others, then to invest in 2 at £100 a piece makes you a sophisticated investor by the criteria, one of the 4. Mm-hmm. So the FCA has clearly said, we know that seems like a low bar, but we want retail investors to have a path so they can become educated, they can review the information, they can sign documents and see the prospectus. We don't want to keep poor people closed from this if they want to put the homework in, but we want to give them a path, and a path that can be checked. The other side of this is the fact that if you use a platform, you can talk to retail investors. If you don't use a platform, you can't. It's as simple as that. Mm-hmm. And then suitability really almost gets to, are you an IFA? And that's why I think it says preliminary suitability, because only IFAs really should be doing that level of assessment. Mm-hmm. But that's not what they're trying to do. What they are trying to do is stop you from taking money from people who are naive, which includes the people with big pensions, the people who have done well in their industry, their pilots, the doctors or son, they make a bit of money, they have a bit of assets, but they've never been a property investor.
Yeah, okay. So if I summarize in one sentence and then we'll wrap up, really what this press release is confirming that the initial temporary ban on the marketing of these speculative liquid securities, mini bonds, loan notes, debentures, etc. They're confirming that those products cannot be shown or even anywhere visible that a retail restricted investor can even see. As well as that, while you can still market these to high net worth and sophisticated investors, they've kind of added an extra hurdle to jump over by way of suitability when it comes to that market. So it's not that we can't do these things, it's just A, it's got to be the high net worth sophisticated investors, and B, there's an extra hurdle now in place of suitability that perhaps wasn't there before.
Yeah, and the platform, yours and others, all have tests. So people actually have to run it through a test, which is your suitability test. So the platform's already doing this. 2 quick comments. Andrew, I don't have a response yet. I'd like to have group discussions with people and build up a bigger response. And Ian, the FCA has clearly stated they're now actively looking at the data. They're going to be trolling for data, and they've redirected some of their resources. So they're going to be proactively searching rather than just reactively responding. But the easiest way for them to find this stuff is to get complaints from members of the public, which are generally investors in deals.
Okay, thank you very much, John, for that. Brilliant sort of high-level overview, and you've got John's contact details there if you want to reach out and go into more detail. He'd be more than happy to do that. So really appreciate that, John. Thank you. So just wrapping up the session then, there's a number of new case studies up on our platform. I encourage everyone to go and have a look at these. If you're a fundraiser, it gives an example of how you can present some of your past deals. And there's one up there from commercial project up from Scotland with Taylor Capital. There's one there from Yieldwise. We had Chris on here last week. There's an example of the stuff he does. And there's one there from Target 5 down in Brighton. So encourage potential investors, fundraisers, go on, have a look, and you can actually leave your email address and an amount if you happen to be an investor, and you can actually record your interest in those type of projects, which is great feedback to the fundraisers. So again, there's our normal slide for John and myself. If you do want to have some type of consultancy, some of that could very well be regarding compliance, where you just want to make sure that what you're doing is compliant and putting a proper pathway in place for fundraising in the future. then reach out to myself or John, and we can provide that solution for you. So that is us for today. So I want to thank everyone for joining us. Very important topic. This will be up probably about a week's time. This will be on our new upcoming YouTube channel, which will be launched soon. And you'll be able to go back and go over these slides again. So listen, thanks so much for joining.
Soon is in a week, is what you're saying?
I said I'm hoping around about a week and a half.
Okay.
That's the plan. But when
that
we
is,
can
we'll
get obviously announce it on this.
Conversation going. Yep.
Yeah, we'll announce it on this, and it'll also go out on emails to people and stuff. So, and again, we'll announce next week's guest. Probably tomorrow we'll put something out on next week's guest. So that's grand. Thanks very much, everybody. Have a fantastic day, and of course, above all, currently, stay safe.